Welcome to Martial Wisdom. Here you can listen to conversations on all kinds of topics related to martial arts. My guest in today's show is Duncan Francis, and we're going to talk about introducing de-escalation into your training. If you'd like to support the show or just get more content, I encourage you to take a look at the Spirit Aikido online program. As of the recording of this episode, we now have over 400 videos in the program. My profound thanks to those who have subscribed to the program and those who have contributed to the PayPal tip jar. I hope you enjoy this episode. Now, on with the discussion. Welcome back to Modern Aikidoist podcast. I've got my guest Duncan Francis with me here tonight. Glad to have him back. He brought up a great subject that we're going to be talking about tonight, which is bringing in de-escalation and other human exchange type of training into your physical training on the mat. And I'm thrilled to have Duncan here. Thank you, Duncan, for joining me.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure.
Before we get started, I did want to give everybody an update. I know it's been a number of months since people have seen a podcast that I've released. I've been busy with other things. This summer, my father had some severe health issues, and I stepped up to help him, and it did not leave me time, unfortunately, to produce more podcasts. And he passed just a few weeks ago, and so that struggle is over for me, at least for the time being. So I'm glad to kind of be able to get back to it. I did still kept releasing, filming and releasing videos on my online program, the Spirit Aikido online program, and we are now a little bit over 400 episodes or 400 videos on that. And I'm happy for everybody that has supported this channel by contributing to that and enjoying the content there. So thank you, and I just wanted to give everybody an update. So I'm glad to be back at it. I've got a laundry list of topics that I would like to discuss on podcasts, and I'll be getting to those as time comes in. So thank you for your patience, and we have not disappeared, just taken a short break. Actually, not so short break. It's been longer than I would have wanted, but we're back. So Duncan, thank you for joining us. I wanted to dig deep into this topic. And Duncan and I were talking just before the show started that when he released his recent video talking about introducing de-escalation methods and ways to introduce it to your students and to practice it on the mat while you are doing your physical training, that took me back almost like a blast from the past of, this is a subject I very much wanted to tackle because I long ago realized through the College of Hard Knocks that martial arts and application is not just the physical. It is far more the mental and the human behavior. And the longer I live and the older I get, the more I realize almost every subject that you can imagine comes down to human behavior, whether it's economics, philosophy, martial arts, strategy. All of it is about how do humans behave? How do they respond? How do they react? How do you read their intentions? How do you interact with them effectively? And I would say Aikido or any martial art really is having a backup if you are not able to effectively communicate with somebody. And that can be it through no fault of your own. It could be through your own fault. It could be any number of things. But the physical is what we need as a backup when our negotiating skills fail, or when our awareness skills fail, or when our perception skills fail, even our life choices fail. That's when we might need that physical backup. But for those people that point out that martial arts is not just about how hard you can hit or how you can muscle somebody around or control their body, it is about human behavior. And so I like the video that you put up, Duncan, in that it addresses crossing that boundary, but beyond thinking of your martial art merely as a set of techniques, as a set of technical, physical actions and interactions with another human. There's a lot that goes on well before anything becomes physical. And so I wanted to get that as kind of a starting intro for everybody. Maybe you've not seen the video, and I'll encourage you, and I'll put a link in the description if you want to go watch that. But I think everybody has heard the, well, What about self-defense? And so, well, you've got to have awareness and you've got to have de-escalation. But we give this lip service, but what do we do to actually train it? How do we integrate that into our training?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely, and it isn't easy. And one of the things, that's always kind of puzzled me. I mean, I guess I was the same as everybody else. You first start doing an art and you just take it for granted everything your sensei says, and then as the decades go past, you kind of think, okay, people keep telling me I'm doing an art of peace, or I'm doing an art of conflict resolution, or I'm doing an art of de-escalation, or whatever it is. Where's that in the syllabus? And I thought, oh, maybe it's just because my sensei was Kenshiro Abe's student, so he's real old school. This was 1950s Aikido, where it was kind of snap it and move on to the next person kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
But it isn't. It just does not seem to exist. I mean, I hope someone in the comments is from a dojo somewhere and has this as part of their syllabus, because I'm keen to pick their brains. But I've not seen this. Certainly not in Aikikai. Certainly not in Tamiki. I'm guessing not in the Ki guys either. I mean, just to name the major kind of the major organization. It bemuses me how the art can sell itself as this without formal tuition of, if you like, the science of this. I mean, we're lucky because our organization, as you well know, being linked with it, that we've got martial artists from all over the world, from lots of different styles, from lots of different backgrounds. So you get different language being used and different approaches, everything from competitive arts through to much more practical ones, different cultural backgrounds. So when you start talking about a subject, you get lots of different spins on it. You get cultural spins, you get different realities, even just down to the language that's used. Chinese martial arts are different from Japanese martial arts, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that came out of this, as I was 5 years ago or so, trying to put this into our syllabus, and I was doing the research, was how hard it was for me to find a martial art anywhere, like any martial art, even boxing or judo or something, that has this in their syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite mind-blowing, and I thought, well, maybe someone needs to put something together that's simple and based on science, and then just offer that around. So I've been trying to do that. What's ended up happening is that I'm beginning people saying, "Oh, that's a good idea," and then they don't do anything with it because it is hard to implement for sure. But they all give me comments, so I've been using that to tune what we've got. And something a friend of mine in the UK who owns basically a bodyguard company, they do close protection work for Silicon Valley, for the trucks, for supermodels, for anyone that's kind of needs someone to be looking out for them. And he used a fabulous phrase, the psychology of engagement. Mm-hmm. And if you think about the whole de-escalation, conflict resolution thing, if you think about it as the psychology of engaging with other human beings, you can then apply that as a almost like a caveat to your normal physical day-to-day training. Then, okay, someone swings a punch at you, you're moving out of the way, and you do whatever technique is appropriate. But within that, you've got this extra thing you can overlay, which gives you the context. Are these people drunk? Do these people have friends? Was this people genuinely trying to kill you? If you don't disable this person, are your friend and family in danger? All of this other stuff should be in your head while you're doing things, so that you can overcome the I just need to survive, kill, maim, destroy kind of Godzilla response kind of thing, And it's very hard. But the more we've looked at it, the more we've played around with it, and I still think we're far from getting this right. What we've found is the things that people can pick up, the things that people seem to be able to understand and apply to what they're doing, and the stuff, initially that is kind of inarguable, that has proper science backing it up. There's lots of conflict resolution stuff out there, lots of stuff that's taught to law enforcement. We've got a lady over in, I think she's in Rio now, posts quite a lot in the Facebook group, and she's a prison officer. I won't give a name because obviously they don't like to give that too much information out. But I know they get regular training as and when current thinking changes or techniques change, and that's all about body language and de-escalation and positioning and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So whilst it seems difficult, I think if anyone that's keen to get involved in this and add it into their syllabus or bring it into their dojos, even if they're just going to play with it initially, I think the starting point is to go from the stuff where there is proven science, where it's inarguable that certain things are correct and have certain stimulus to people. And if you work from there, then it can be tailored depending on the attitude of the dojo and obviously the individual people.
Sure.
So that's kind of that's our starting point with this.
It's funny that when I started on this path, it led me very quickly to the art of negotiation, and the art of even high tension negotiation, which, if you talk about pre-violence, oftentimes it is a very tense verbal exchange that boils over into physical. It's not just somebody lunges out and attacks you out of nowhere. It's usually there's some kind of a conflict, some kind of a what would you call it, a dispute that escalates. And I think this is where people, when they hear the word de-escalation, they immediately think, well, as long as I'm not escalating things, then I'm de-escalating. And that's not true. No. In fact, I find the term de-escalation is often interpreted by people who don't have a good level of experience with high tension disputes, that they think if I'm just nice and I back off, then I'm doing what I need to do, which is what de-escalation on a simple level means. Yeah. Unfortunately, when you are faced with a predator or a hyper aggressive person and they see you backing down, they see that they're exerting their power is succeeding. They are getting what they want. And to simply say, oh, as long as I'm a nice guy and I'm not being assertive, then I'm good. Like that will solve my problem.
Yeah.
And in some cases it will. Of course, if you run out and be aggressive and you're an asshole and start getting in people's faces, yes, you're going to get into more violent encounters than you would if you were a polite, civilized person. However, and this is what quickly got me into the art of profiling, the art of reading body language, the art of trying to perceive where somebody's at, to understand whether they are that aggressive person that will keep pushing. And if you back off or you don't enforce your boundaries, they will keep pushing until they get everything they want. And they may even go for more than that. And so this got me into probably what I would classify as one of the top 3 crucial life skills that you could ever have. And that is establishing a boundary and enforcing it, doing it politely, but doing it firmly, doing it without being aggressive or belligerent, but doing it clearly and calmly. And I think this is where I love studying all of the violence professionals, whether it's police officers, and I'm not talking about the ones that go screaming, raging into a rage whenever they don't like whatever is being told to them. I'm talking about real professionals, the ones that will always say, you stay calm, you're a professional. You need to be clear, you need to be calm, you need to, communicate and keep things from escalating into violence. Those people will say the same thing all the time, is you don't want to escalate, but you need to very clearly lay out, here are the boundaries of what's going to happen and what you need to do and how this is going to go smoothly.
You hit one of the nails on the head there. I mean, the confidence aspect and not looking like a victim when you're trying to de-escalate, that comes from that whole thing that you've got to know how to fight before you can choose not to fight. And people can sense that. And if you've got someone that's being predatory, then you can't have victim body language expression or anything. And that is very hard, especially for girls and, smaller people. But you also have to you also have to communicate a clear way out of the situation. If things are escalating and they look like they're on their way to violence, you have to verbalize and do everything you can with your body language, your expression, even hand position. The whole thing has to allow everybody a way out of that situation with the least trauma to people's involved egos.
And I wanted to say too, like this episode, we're not going to be able to get even halfway complete to how much depth there is here. Like this could be an entire curriculum all on its own.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the idea of integrating, and this is one of my biggest challenges as I took this on, was how do I introduce these concepts to my students without turning my classes into a full-on lecture where it's just a bunch of talk? Because when you get your gi on, you get out on the mat, you're expecting a certain amount of physical exchange.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I thought that I would try, and I'm happy at how this turned out, because it did not turn into like long in-depth lectures. They were kind of morsels in between when we would do physical exchanges, and then I would show some body language. I'd say, here's some of the body language you're looking for. Here are the red flag things that a body can do. Don't listen what comes out of somebody's mouth. Their body will tell you.
The monkey dance.
Right. Well, there's the monkey dance, there's the bladed stance, there's the shoulder, there's the glare. Simple things that anybody, even that doesn't know anything about body languages, they see you do it, they'll know something's wrong. And then you explain, well, here's what you just saw. You may not have even realized it, but something gave you the creeps. I'm going to tell you what gave you the creeps. I didn't blink for 20 seconds. I stared at you without blinking.
Yeah.
And you give them I like giving students a tactile lesson, not just what I tell them, but I said, I want you to see this body language. I want you to feel what this is like. And then I want you to do it. I want you to be the bad guy. And here's one of the things that I think is probably one of the biggest shortcomings of the Aikido community in general, is most of the practitioners tend to come from the suburbs. They've never seen a truly violent monster. They've not interacted or seen a dark side of humanity, and to the point where they don't even comprehend that it could exist. Like they see it in a TV show or in a movie or something like that, and even that's toned down. I'll tell you, for anybody that thinks that movie violence and TV violence is creepy and scary, that's nothing compared to what it really looks like. Right. And so this is the challenge of how do we get a community that is largely, not everybody, but largely a peaceful, calm people that are philosophers, they are scholars, they are intelligentsia, to realize and truly comprehend and understand what an animal is like, what a human being that doesn't have any regard, what a sociopath or a psychopath is like, and how to read them and how to deal with them. It's like a rattlesnake. They're dangerous. If you don't handle them correctly, you could get killed. But you have to understand, to be able to spot them first, and then know what to do.
Yeah, and it's so nuanced. It's such a hard thing. I mean, you've already listed some of the classic things there. It is so nuanced, though, and people are often at the most vulnerable when they've had a few drinks, or when they're tired, or when they're not feeling well, or whatever. Anyone predatory senses that. So the other side of the coin, they're seeing the weakened body language, they're seeing the lack of and you just have to be aware of all these things. I mean, it's an extension of Zanshin, but that's another terribly misused and kind of over-egged term. I mean, just as a kind of an idea for people watching, and I'm hoping that we will get some people commenting and saying, we do this or we do that, even if it's something, an instructor in a club is an ex-police officer and just happens to casually mention some stuff somewhere. If there's some good nuggets in that, these are the kind of things that need to be correlated somehow. So, I mean, one thing that we did, and tell me to shut up rambling if I go on. One thing we did about 5 years ago was to change our on-guard basic stance. You know, the classic Aikido kind of Yoshinkan thing, or the what you know. I completely eradicated that based upon conversations I had with one of the guys that's on made a couple of videos on the channel. Who's a
Are you talking kind of the rigid one like Yoshinkan tends to use?
Yeah, but just basically when you're starting the class and you've bowed in, you've done your warm up, and you're doing some taisabaki or something like that. That kind of the basic hammy, you know.
Okay.
We're still 3/4. We're still half body. We're still but for us, it's more like this. It's as if you've walked into a room full of naughty teenagers, and you're just, you've not got a smile on your face, but you're relaxed, and your ears are over your shoulders. Your structure's nice, and you're just going, all right, all right, calm down. Almost offhandishly, just calm. The great thing about that is that you can guarantee if there's any violence anywhere in public, someone's got their phones out, and even if you're an old arthritic diabetic like myself, in his 60s, and someone starts on their drunk, and I'm lucky enough to throw him out a window or whatever, in a year's time when that comes to court, all you're going to see is a badly edited video of the guy with a lifelong martial arts experience, and some psycho who's now in a nice suit pleading. It happens all the time. So if your body language is looking like you're saying calm down immediately, if that's the thing that's already there, that does you loads of favors for anyone watching. Any witnesses, anything, look, he's clearly trying to calm the other guy down. 45 degrees starts for something that Dorman taught me. Never square on. That's you're that's a challenge, but don't turn your back. So you're basically at 45 degrees at a T angle, and if they move towards you, you're keeping you're keeping your safe distance, so you're out of range, but you're tracking that 45 degrees, so that they have to kind of really aggressively make a move to close that distance down, whilst you're still being passive, but you're not kind of backing off and being the victim. That is a really interesting thing to do, and you can do that with kids. That's quite a good game to do with kids, where you get them to try, and one person just tries to maneuver the other one with aggressive body language through some cones, and you get the kids just to kind of move their way back, and it just gets them used to turning their head and taking information in, so they can do the risk assessment of the area. Because the last thing you want to be doing if someone's closing you down is trip over a chair, or back into their mates, what was it? The body language thing, obviously with hands and face. If you look down your nose at someone, that can be taken, and that's really weird, because sometimes you're trying to keep a decent posture but just looking down your nose can be seen as being you're disregarding that person. Same thing as if you drop your chin into a fighting stature, immediately this guy wants to fight. So you've got to kind of keep the structure of your head and your expression. You mentioned this already with the eyes and stuff. If you smile, people will think you're mocking them, so you can't smile. If you've got a frown and you tighten your mouth up, you're already going to be aggressive. So you've got to stay almost inert. And if anything, you're almost looking like you're welcoming as a friend, but without any kind of weakness showing. And it's a tough thing to do. We played around with this in the mirrors, and we're all laughing at each other, pulling faces and stuff. But it's actually quite tough to do. We had a couple of little scenarios where people were saying, let's try this, let's try that, and you're saying, well, whether you like it or not, that looks aggressive. So until you kind of play around with these things, you don't know what your own personal appearance is, or your own what you're showing to others is. So that's quite a useful thing.
Yeah.
Great tip a doorman said to me is this: when you're talking to someone, so if someone's something in road rage, that's a classic. Someone gets out their car and they're screaming and shouting at you. If you have to get out your car, I mean, if you don't, but if you have to get out your car, when you're talking, even if you're saying, look, you cut me up, I didn't see you, if you're doing this, you're saying me, it's my problem kind of thing, even if you are trying to explain to them that actually they were in the wrong, and you're trying to kind of clear up the the truth of the matter. This isn't going you this and you that, because that's overtly aggressive. And these are simple things that are proven and are taught to prison guards and law enforcement people. But that's great, because if someone does suddenly snap and burst, and you see that shoulder drop and the breath go and the eyes go wide, and you know a punch is coming, your hands are already there. You're already up high. If your hands are down like this, you've got no chance if someone's quick, but the biggest thing, without a doubt, is distance. If you can get, there's a psychology of distance where if you're within, we'll call it meters, but really it's percentages of their reach. But if you say an average largest guy has got a meter reach on their punch, if you can stay 1.5 meters, you're outside, and hopefully, unless you're really slow, if they go to swing at you, you can track that and keep out the distance. But if you can find a way of making the distance bigger, so as you're stepping back and as you're tracking to the 45 degrees, if you can gradually increase that. And I had this maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Someone just in the street just suddenly started throwing punches at me. He was drunk, it was one of those things. But eventually the distance got up to about 5 meters, and you can see in their eyes, they're not sure whether to chase after you or whether it's done. There's like a distance where there is no longer a physical or an option for a physical conflict because it's just too hard. And that's really interesting. You can see the curve of viable aggression just kind of dip off. And that, again, that's a useful thing just to be aware of. So, I mean,
there's a drill that I came up with for teaching the pressure of range, because civilized people don't have any problem with letting somebody walk right up to them, because most people aren't just going to walk up and hit you.
Yeah.
It's the one that does walk up and hit you that you have to worry about. And this has also covered the reaction gap. I call this the reaction gap drill. So I have the target stand there with their hand, like with their finger on their nose, and basically Uke starts about 8 feet away and says, as fast as Uke can hit that hand, he's going to slap the hand. And so, of course, at 8 feet away, you don't feel any pressure. And then Uke closes a little. They take like a step forward. So now they're at about 6 feet. Then they're at about 4 feet. And he swings as fast as he can. And so as Nage sees, when you're there and you see that hand, how fast that thing comes up, now you take a step and they're in range. And the goal is to drop your hand and not let it get slapped. Unless Uke is purposefully slow, they're going to land that thing every time if they get in range. And it gives Nage the chance to gauge the range of where they're safe and where the pressure starts to come in. So now what I'll do is I'll have Nage lower their hand, and I'll have Uke approach, and I say, when you start feeling pressure, like you could get hit in the face, as that pressure starts to come in, you let your hands rise up like they're helium. Let them come up relaxed. That you're not going to come up frightened, but you're going to bring them up. They're going to be at your chest level, and you're going to start to shift. You're going to start to adjust range, not to let them just walk up into slap the hell out of you range. Yep. And they can all, within 5 minutes, they can all feel that pressure. So now, when you trust somebody, you won't have that pressure feel. But if you don't trust somebody, you should feel immediately, like if they get near your buffer zone, your hands should be coming up and you should be shifting and gaining a bit of distance. And then you watch for another body behavior, because this comes into, okay, stay back. Now you establish your boundary. You say, hey, you bring your hands up. You say, hey, stay back there. Just, you can talk to me from where you are. So basically you're saying, no, don't come closer to me. And then you back off. This is the one time you back off. And this is a crucial life lesson. And this applies especially to women and young girls. And almost all of them have learned this lesson the hard way. And that is, when you say no, you watch for the next thing that happens. If the person respects your no and says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable, I'm going to back off. Now that you have at least can have a measure of trust for them. If you tell them no and they keep advancing, that should be the biggest red flag you've ever seen in your life. Do not walk, you run. out of that exchange. And that applies to going on dates, that applies to strangers coming up to you, anything. If somebody says, "Hey, I want to buy you a drink," no, thank you, I really appreciate it, but no, thank you, and say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. If they'll ignore your no, then guess what's going to happen later on when the stakes are higher?
Yeah.
If they ignore that boundary and do not respect your boundary, even though you state it politely, be calm, but clear, say thank you very much, but no, thank you. Watch for that ignoring the no. And I found that with my students, once you open that door up just by describing it just the way that I did, and then you can say, as you can have, uke approach, and it could be uke goes to a grab, same thing we would always do, munadori grab, katadori grab, and they back up and you put your hands up, no, don't touch me. Then you give uke the agency to say, you can back off, or you can say, no, I'm going to grab you. Now you've introduced the exchange of practicing, establishing the boundary, enforcing the boundary, giving the uke the ability to change things up and not just make it a, grab and respond and throw and lock. And it's not a formula. Now they have to have their head on, and they have to be observing, okay, well, how does uke respond to me? And this is the part about martial arts training that's always bothered me, is how little focus is put on, well, what does uke do? Do they change? If uke changes what they do, what do I do instead? Now it's a conversation. It's not just a uke attacks and then I do X. Like, that's a pretty anemic. It's good for beginners and to start practicing on particular things. But if you start wanting to really practice an exchange, you have to practice not only setting your boundary works, and then you have to practice what happens when you set your boundary, it doesn't work. Now you've got to act, or you got to take action. And that can be multi-layered. You can do it with several different attacks, shifts, moving off the line, light, what do you call them, deflections. You don't have to go to a full-on throw on somebody. If they just reach their hand out to you, you might just deflect their hand and keep it from grabbing you and say, hey, listen, keep your hands to yourself, stay back. But be ready if they come at you again. And now you can actually turn that into a drill, into an exercise. And I'll tell you, if you do that for 10 minutes, you will feel mentally exhausted. It's not so much a physical exhaustion, but your brain is having to click on into strategy. Okay, what do I do when I'm watching for this? And then I got to, if this happens, how do I respond? It gets your brain almost into an overload, especially if you do a lot of reps of this. And then be able to get your ukes into a bit of role playing. Okay, pretend you're angry, pretend you're a jackass, pretend you are belligerent drunk, or pretend you are, even some kind of a psychopath, or just I like your shirt. I want to give me your shirt. I want to take your shirt off. So some crazy nut. I think the more that we get ukes to role play this a little bit, and this is very hard. I will tell you. I've trained with police officers that do this type of training for their living. Even they have trouble role playing some of the crazy type of people that you can encounter. They're good. They're better at it than most. And usually, and I'll tell you, for anybody that wants to get started doing this, be prepared for being so silly that you even laugh at yourself. You're like, I feel like a complete idiot acting like I would never act or behave. And it seems silly, but
this is hard. This is why it's not.
It's very, very hard to do. Yeah,
it's a hard thing to implement, and people feel awkward doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the best things you can do, if you do have, know somebody who's a police officer or a bouncer or a doorman or something like that, take them for a couple hours and say, I want you to show me what this behavior looks like. Role play it out for me. Show me what you have seen. And I've found that to be invaluable for, experienced officers and security people to say, you'd never believe it, but this is what it looks like. And they go into the role because they've seen it so many times. And you're just like, who would behave like that? It's whether it's the swearing or the monkey dance thing with the arms flailing around, or the puffing up, or just the aggressive, glaring, snarling face. How many times has your uke ever done that?
No,
they don't. We don't do that. It's like, our ukes are our buddies. They're our pals. They're our friends. They don't set off that hair on the back of your neck standing up thinking like, what is this lunatic about to do? And that gets into the stress inoculation part of training, which
Yeah.
I think is a part of it's the next logical progression when you go into, all right, now I want my uke to pretend to have intent. They're not just being a Gumby dummy throwing an arm at me and smiling and kind of going along with the show. I don't feel any real threat or even a simulated threat by that. Now, when they think like, I'm their asshole neighbor that they've wanted to punch their nose in for 2 years, and now they're coming after me, like
Yeah.
with that level of intention. I've had to work with, and I know that there are some students and fellow students and people that I've trained with that I would never do this with, but there are a handful that I love because I'll say, I want you to show me, give me that intention, like you are trying to hurt me, make me feel scared, because that's what I want to be ready to act in that environment. I don't want to be surprised or shocked by it. If I see it for real, I want to be ready to go. And having had that training partners do that for years, not a ton, but just here and there, has done wonders for me to not let that fear come in. Like I've seen and played with it enough that it's not going to just completely freeze me, if I see real intention. And that's another part of this that I was thrilled to have this discussion, because this topic opens up so many glaring holes in the training that we do that does not get you ready for a real world exchange. And it
Absolutely.
should. I think it should.
Yeah. And that should be not just Aikido. I mean, I think Aikido
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
very, very guilty of that.
Yep.
I mean, my feelings on some of the traditional attacks,
Mhm.
but most traditional martial arts, and it's because it's mainly a social event for a lot of
Yep.
people. So it's good mannered.
Yep.
But it is uncomfortable. As you say, it's mentally uncomfortable. It's physically uncomfortable. It makes people question things in themselves. And I mean, let's just say enough people watch this, and there's the sensei watching that think that this pair of idiots are right. Perhaps we should be putting this into our syllabus. How how should people start to move this in? I mean, I always say to people, start with the basic stance. If your basic stance is taking this into account, that you are going to be filmed, that at least puts the mindset in the background, and you can build on that. But someone's got a dojo. It doesn't matter what martial art they're doing, but especially if it's Aikido, how can they get some of this actually into their syllabus? What would be your
I tell you, there's so many things you could add in, and I'm just coming up with stuff that I've over the years felt, okay, I think this is a good lesson. I want to integrate this. And body language is a big one of them. Being able to read people, actually giving my students homework. I say, go out into a crowd. And of course, this was easier before COVID, but go out into a mall somewhere. Go where there's a lot of people, and I want you to watch a single individual and try to figure out, like, why are they there? What are they doing there? Read kind of their feeling, because you can watch how somebody walks, how they hold their shoulders, how they look around. You start to feel like, is this person having a good day? Or are they having a bad day? Are they, this is how you get started into profiling, which I think is huge, absolutely huge. In fact, one of my first times working at a bar, I was working an event, kind of this little rural bar out in kind of nowhere. They were doing this, block party thing. And I go in there to help with security, and I'm helping the band kind of get their stuff, unloaded up to the stage and whatnot. And the guy that was running the security there, I was right next to him because he was loading this amp, and he turns and he looks over at the front door, and I look, because I've got that kind of I can read predators, and I know instantly when he looks at something, he's looking for a reason. So I look right at where he's looking, and this guy just walks in the door, and the dude leans over and he says, keep an eye on that guy. Before the end of the night's out, we're going to be hauling him out of here. And I looked at this guy, and he was by himself. There was nothing really that he didn't look, like he was tattooed or didn't look like a, psychotic or anything like that. And I said, "Do you know this guy? Have you ever seen him before?" He's like, "No, never seen him before." And I kept looking. I'm like, what did he see that no normal person would see? And
Yeah.
sure enough, within 2 hours, we were hauling that guy out. There was three of us that were taking him out of there. And, I'd heard about the old, the tricks of the doorman. It's like, okay, watch what somebody walks, especially if a guy walks in alone. Keep an eye on him. Watch what he orders. If he starts ordering tequila shots or whiskey, you keep a double eye on him, because those are the two that really will send somebody into a fight rage. Now if he orders a daiquiri or something, probably not a big deal. But as I started to see what he had mastered the art of profiling. I don't know what he saw to this day. I don't know what he saw, but he had so much experience. He just knew a troublemaker when he saw it. And, I've met FBI profilers who do this with, people they're interviewing once they've been either arrested or they're being questioned, stuff like that. And they use similar skills. It's about reading somebody's intention. And I think I shared this story a couple of years ago on my podcast. And this was when I was first introduced to this. And this was prior to COVID by several years. And I was down in New Orleans with a bunch of friends, and I decided to go back to my hotel, and I had to walk all the way across the French Quarter. And by myself, it was 1 a.m. And I thought, man, hey, this would be a good chance to practice this. A lot of people. So as I went from the dark end of Bourbon Street, and I came to, where the strip is, and I started walking down the street, and this was the tip I was given. Look at people as though you're a predator. You want money. You want something, and you're going to take it. Look and see who the easiest people would be to take it from and why. And so I started looking at what people were wearing on their feet. Were they in groups? Were they with guys? Were they athletic? Were they drunk? Were they distracted? And I'm telling you, the world completely changed. What I saw was way different than any other time I'd been on Bourbon Street. When you're out with your friends casually, it's one thing. But if you start looking people up and down, how easy would this be to take them?
Yeah.
And then I saw on Bourbon Street where there are these dark alleys, which if you took 2 steps from a well-lit sidewalk, you would be in a whole nother world. What if you were in that alley and you could just watch somebody go by and you grab them and pull them into that alley, and no one would see them and hear them.
Yeah.
And then the real learning lesson happened. As I walked, and I felt like I was a lion walking on the plains. I was like looking over the gazelles and the animals that were there. And then I saw the other predators, the ones that were not there to party. They weren't there with a group of people. They weren't out to dinner. They weren't coming home from dinner. They weren't tourists. They weren't walking around with their alien, head bottle, drinking glasses or anything. I saw, like a chef guy in a chef's jacket. He was out having a smoke. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was on his break. He was winding down from the evening. But then there were people that didn't have anything legitimate that they were doing. Right. They weren't doing anything wrong. They weren't doing anything illegal, but they were studying the same way I was. They were looking around and studying, they were watching the people. And I actually years later, I did the same thing with my wife. We were in E Block in Minneapolis downtown. I said, I want you to study this. And I went with her through the exact same drill. And after that, she's like, this was an amazing experience of, watching, if you're going to go rob somebody, who would you go rob? Is the woman on the 3-inch heels and the full leather or full fur coat, how far is she going to run in those heels? She ain't running anywhere, So being able to profile, and I think this is when we go into the dojo, we practice. What are we doing? What are we feeling? What is our balance? What is our movement? Where's our mind? That actually flips it, and you say, don't worry about you. worry about watch what your target's doing, watch what your other person's doing. And this crosses into the subject of the art of negotiation. You never go into a negotiation saying, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, this is what I'm going to do. You go in and you say, what can we do to make this a win for you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You have to put more investment into what your opponent's doing than thinking about what you are going to do. Yeah. And that's the way of strategy. And the more I drilled down into this subject, I realized Aikido, to me anyway, or for me, was the art of strategy expressed. And for that, I'd say there's no greater strategist than Sun Tzu. And he would say, how do you put this? The best battle is the one you win without ever fighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, that is what described what I felt Aikido should be.
Yeah.
And that is, I want to win. My win condition is I go home and I'm not hurt, and neither is anyone that I know or love. Like that is the art of self-protection. Yeah, I don't want to fight a battle in order to win that battle.
So much of this subject, and again, we tend to talk about it from the point of the conflict has already started. But yep. Something you hit upon there, the preemptive de-escalation, your risk assessment. Mm-hmm. If you're not putting yourself in a situation where these things are likely to happen in the first place, or you are reading a crowd, or you're reading a situation or a potential situation, and these are obvious. Walking into a bar where there's a big bunch of drunk guys in the corner already rowdy, mm-hmm. Maybe we drink somewhere else. Yep. Rather than just letting your ego say, no, it'll be fine, I can handle it, and all that. It's and the aforementioned girl with the fur coat and the high-heeled shoes on. When we do ladies self-defense courses, that's one of the things I'll say. If you're on your own and you're waiting for your Uber, or your sober driver in your group has hooked up with someone and you've been left on your own, take your pointy shoes off. Stand with your back under a light. A shop closed, it's got its light on. If you're using your phone, don't do this. Do it like this so you can still see everything. And you've got a lovely shoe with a 4-inch spike in your hand, legitimately, which just happens to be a really good weapon. Yeah. And you've stopped being that Bambi and the snow thing. Mm-hmm. So the layers of this go on and on and on. But unless you're, as you rightly say, unless you're giving it adequate consideration as an overarching framework to what you do, knowing how to put a Nikio on someone is largely pointless, because it could well be too late by the time this already happens.
And where I fit it in is that there are self-protection skills, which is exactly what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
And then there's self-defense skills. That's the physical stuff.
Yeah.
That's for when your self-protection skills fail. And you can do everything right and still have to go physical. And that's where a lot of the de-escalation talk kind of bugs me, because there's an assumption that if you're just nice enough and you back off and just give up, that you won't ever have to go physical. And that is not true. You can't count. You can try it, but you can't necessarily count on it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I again, one of the guys I mentioned earlier, who's a professional, and he was talking to me about the mirroring technique he'll use if people come to him with a grievance, especially if people are very upset. And sometimes it might be upset with him because he's given them a double shift, or he's said they can't have a day off, or whatever it is. And rather than him just saying, if you don't like it, go and work somewhere else, kind of thing, and being like a stoic, he'll say, I totally feel you. I said, this isn't ideal. What can we do to sort this out? And he'll mirror their body language, he'll mirror their tone of language, and he'll gradually take the sting out of it until they're both working together. And he even does a thing where he'll be talking to someone and he'll do the 45 degrees and he'll be looking away the way they're looking. So rather than the person focusing their energy and their frustration on him, he'll be it's almost like you're blocking a punch. He'll be doing that, and he'll be kind of looking into the middle distance to get the energy of the thing going past you both. I mean, it's wonderful to watch. He's so good at it. He is so good
Yeah,
at
I'm
it.
glad you brought that up, because that is one thing that I've shown to my students, which is to avoid the chest to chest.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
When somebody faces up to you, you do want to kind of get off of their center line, because the most dangerous place you're ever going to be is smacked right in front of somebody.
for sure. Yeah,
So you want to move off the line a little bit, which is kind of giving way. You sort of, they're being dominant, and you are giving them their space. So
yeah, absolutely.
you're not meeting that. In fact, and I will tell my students all the time, if you're ever doing job interviews, never have your chair facing the person you're interviewing, because it's very intimidating. Being chest, even if there's a desk in between you, chest to chest is a very confrontational
Yeah,
position. If you want to have an effective interview that you're not going to make the other person nervous and you want to kind of get to know them, have
really
your
chill.
two chairs kind of arm to arm, like that 45 degrees you were talking about,
Yeah,
because it is all psychological. It is all about human behavior.
yeah. And
And
it's interesting if you watch uh, big cats. If you watch them on wildlife programs or whatever, you'll see that whole thing where you get a challenger to the alpha male, or even kind of a lone animals try and join a pack. You can see that whole thing where there's the kind of the circling thing,
Mhm.
but once they realize there's not going to be a direct challenge, obviously if it kicks off, it kicks off, but
Yep.
you'll see that thing where there's like that 45 degrees, and it's almost you're showing enough vulnerability by being 3/4 on to say, look, I'm trusting you, but you're still enough presented, shall we say, so that if it suddenly turns, you've got something there. And it's a really interesting kind of concept on the interspatial distance and the shape of that space. It's not
Sure.
just my eye, it's not just distance, it's how your biomechanical frame is structured to your other person's.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's all of this stuff, again, like we were saying earlier, it's science. It
Yeah.
should just be in all martial arts, but it needs people to take it up and to try and do something with it. And
There's also a lesson that I really like teaching, and that I tell my students, you can practice this all the time. In fact, you should practice it. And that is, and I call this the eye contact drill,
yeah,
is you should be comfortable looking at somebody right in the eye for about 2 to 3 seconds.
yeah,
Don't practice not darting your eyes away the instant you look at them. And this is a huge predator body language thing. When I look you in the eye and I look down, that's submissive.
yeah,
If I'm going to tell you that I'm another predator, I'm going to look you in the eye for 2 to 3 seconds. I'm comfortable. And then I'm going to take my gaze and I'm going to look side to side. I'm not going to look down.
yeah, for
And
sure.
this is, even people that don't know this will feel the difference.
Yeah.
And so what I tell my students and everybody that I run into is like, don't look down from somebody's eyes. Just you can nod your head a little bit, like you acknowledge their presence, and then you keep scanning.
Yeah,
Because then you're telling them, I'm looking around like a predator. I'm not looking like prey.
Yeah, and that's risk assessment, which is you've got to do. Knowledge is power. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So these things could only take a moment, on the mat. But I love giving, and my instructor did this with me and my fellow students at the time, was he'd kind of like, you can do this when you're out and around. You can practice Aikido outside of the dojo. In fact, you should. There are tons of opportunity to practice all these things. And the beautiful part is that most people won't even know you're practicing it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Including things like head covers. You can, as somebody walks close to you and you don't know who they are and they're going to pass right by you, just kind of scratch your hair a little bit. You got a head cover up. And you got used to, as that pressure started increasing, and you didn't have your hand in your pocket. It wasn't around your back, but it got to somewhere if you needed it just for that moment, and you just made it look like, just doing this.
Yeah.
But it was right where you're ready, and you did it based on the closing distance. And somebody just walked by, no big deal. They didn't even know, but you did. You knew that you were watching, and the approach and practicing the timing of bringing the hand up and making it look like nothing.
Yeah.
And that to me, it's not just body language at that point. Now you're reading, and responding and practicing your own physical responses. So you're just camouflaging it a little bit.
I like the idea of, I've been taking notes actually. I like the idea of giving people homework because,
Yeah.
Again, one of the things that is hard, I think, for dojos to do is to implement this into syllabus.
Sure.
And a lot of people have got that embarrassment. I mean, Kiwis are notoriously kind of stoic and don't. It's a bit like the Japanese. They don't like to say no to people, and
Sure.
they don't like any form of confrontation or conflict.
Yeah.
Obviously, when they're drunk, the same as any other human anywhere on the planet, it all kicks off. And when
there's a couple of also some. These are also predator behaviors, but they cross over to humans because we are the apex predators.
Right.
One of which is if you show your teeth, it means that you're being aggressive. And we smile when we try to disarm somebody. But like a dog sees that if you're showing me your teeth. So if you smile, smirk, but don't do a big shit-eating grin, because that can be interpreted as
for sure. I've had a couple of professionals say to me, "Don't even smile," because you might think you're smiling in a kind of a welcoming way, and they might think he's being a smart ass. He's laughing at me.
No, you can practice having an easygoing look on your face, not to have your lips curled or the glare or the frown or the scowl. Another one is, and this comes down to things like this.
Yeah.
When we see this, a predator views this as a claw, and it's coming towards our face, which is when somebody points at you, usually you get almost like that heat. You start feeling that pressure.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to mention this too, from this is 10 claws.
Yeah.
So what I was shown years ago, and I like this, is if your hands come up, you keep the fingers in.
Yeah.
Don't point them.
I think it depends on the body.
This kind of covers what you're talking about earlier.
If you're, I agree. If you're like this, then you're, but I think if it's the shoulders are dropped and you're just kind of okay, let's calm it down, kind of thing.
Right.
That's your initial thing, which gives you a bit of physical distance. Yeah. But then you can be kind of talking, and you can be, you can be, whatever it is, and it's that whole Dorman thing where you're just, as you say, you're keeping your Jodan area protected,
Yeah,
but it's interesting the claw analogy. Absolutely.
By the way, one of my favorites, because I remember being shown the Jack Benny, this one, that one. Yeah. One of my favorites is actually scratching my shoulder like with my hand this way.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I mean, you talk about the perfect cover. You pretty much have got the perfect cover if you just scratch, and you just make this look like look like a natural.
Sure.
You can get your hands going kind of all over with all the full covers, and then
there must be so many little tricks like this that are brilliant things that could be just told.
There's one one that I added in, which was, and this plays into how I get students used to randori, and there's one rule that pretty much dominates all of them: don't let anybody behind you.
Absolutely.
And this I actually learned about from how good street people tend to ambush targets.
One in front, one goes to the side.
Yep, they'll do the velociraptor thing, right? They'll get one engaged, and as soon as one of them gets you into that, the frozen, oh my God, what's going on in front of me? You're so concerned here.
Yeah,
it's going to be the guy that comes up behind you that you don't see. So it always has to be, and this plays into that 45 degrees, is like you start to circle, and you want to keep an eye on the one, but you want to sort of see what was behind you, and you can count to about 2. If you get beyond 2, there's somebody there, and they're going to hit you in the back of the head.
For sure. Yeah.
And so this, of course, plays into the randori movement when we do the whole, running around and that sort of thing. But I'll tell people to practice this as they're walking down sidewalks. Watch if there's a little alley or a walk or someplace you can't see, because if you go beyond it and somebody stops you, hey, can you get me $2 for bus fare? And you start chatting with them, there could be somebody behind you within 2 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you do stop, kind of walk past them and turn so you're facing them from around the other side of them.
Yeah.
Don't stop when they're trying to get you to stop.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are the kind of things that people just need to be told and have in their repertoire, so that these triggers make them react. I mean, a good way of wrapping up might be to actually ask people. I'm sure everyone watching has had an experience or has a tip, either from something they've done wrong and kind of, have learned the hard way. Or, I mean, when I was a teenager, I had a guy, I was on a dance floor, and a guy came up and danced right in front of me. And I'm thinking, this is a bit weird. And he headbutted me. I'm never doing that again. I got up off the floor and I'm thinking, okay, that's
But yeah, and this is great. If you want to put in the comments, your thoughts,
because I'd love to see what other people.
So I know we're going to spark a great discussion with this, and I'd love to hear what everybody has to say.
For sure.
And I want to put in one more, and this is actually a student came back to me and he said, "Boy, I love what you've showed me, because it actually worked for me." And this is the lesson: always make your enemy take the long way to get you. And the way that this expressed itself, and we kind of trained it a little bit, which is, if there's a plant or a garbage can, a car, have it in between you and this other person that you're worried about. Yeah. Well, he told me that this one day he and his daughter were out riding a bike around the lake, riding their bikes rather, and they pull up to one of these maps where it shows you where you are in the park, and so they stop, get off their bikes, and this guy comes up, and he's like, "Yeah, can you tell me where the gas station is?" And he says, I knew not to take my eyes off him, because my instinct was, as I was talking with this guy here, is I'd look and I'd say, yeah, it's up there about 3 or 4 blocks, but I knew not to turn away. So I kept my eyes on him. I had my bike in between us. So if I needed to, I could just kind of toss at him and stand back, because then he couldn't cover the ground. But I said, yeah, I pointed and I looked right at him and I said, yeah, it's up about that way, about 3 blocks. But he said, I never took my eyes off him. And he said, for some reason, as the guy approached, I just got this weird feeling. I don't know what was going on. It wasn't that I felt threatened, but it also, something seemed a little off. And he said, but I kept my eyes on him, and after I showed him where it was, he kind of, oh, okay, thanks. And he kind of wandered off. But he's like, I felt secure, because when he approached, I just wasn't at a place he could get to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Easily. And it fortunately didn't take him much maneuvering to do it. And he did it so smoothly, the guy didn't even notice, that he wasn't looking away or anything. But he said, I knew, because of the range drill, he closed close enough that if I turned my head and I looked where I was pointing, he could have clipped me so fast I would have been down. But I didn't. I kept my eyes on him. And I said, well, you did really well, because from a body language standpoint, he knew you were looking at him. Yeah, when somebody wants to throw you a cheap shot, they're going to trick you into looking away, or they're going to catch you when you're not looking, you're not paying attention, you're looking at your phone. When he says, hey, do you got any change? And you look down at your pocket, when you go into your pocket, that's his opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. But something I remember seeing a lot. I used to, I'm a musician, I'm a professional musician, so I've spent most of my life in and around venues and in and around drunk people. And one thing I've seen so many times, because quite often, like you were talking about the security guys helping with the gear, we've loaded up and I'll be sitting on the door with the security guys and you'll be talking martial arts or whatever it is and just chatting. The number of times I've seen people who push their luck and get told, no, go on your bike, and then they'll pretend to go away. So they'll turn and they'll
that classic old trick. Yep.
And they'll wait for like a second, and then they come at you like a bat out of hell. Yep. That kind of trying to make you just seen it so many
almost times. Every time it's so poorly sold that you'd have to be a fool not to see the fake. But, I mean,
people do, especially if they've had a few drinks. Obviously, security guys.
If you've been drinking, then you might miss it. But generally, the acting is bad. So if you ever see that turn away, move somewhere.
Yeah,
don't be there when he comes around, because if he looks away, he's lost sight of you. Yeah. So remember that you have an advantage.
This particular guy on the door, actually, who was really interesting. He always used to have a chair, like a big old wooden, like a like you might have a dining table kind of thing.
Right.
And I thought that he might have had a bad knee or something, and to sit on it. But he used to often he would stand behind it with his hands on the thing, or he would put his drink bottle on it or whatever. And it was basically, like you said, it was kind of a body language obstacle thing.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be behind it, like reaching over at people, but it would be just enough to kind of break up the space, and it was yeah,
Stuff like that does a great job of making you harder to get to. It just
for
takes
sure.
longer.
Yeah,
And sliding a chair into somebody's shins. Oh, it's
yeah, for sure.
a chair is a highly underrated
It'll
weapon.
be really interesting to see what people come up with, because as I said,
Yeah,
everything we do at our dojo is always a work in progress. We're always looking for ways
absolutely.
to
You
tighten
know,
things, to evolve things, and
for
I'll
those
steal stuff
people
from anywhere.
that have that attitude of I've learned everything, I've learned it all. They all the best that I've ever met have said I haven't even gotten started yet. In fact, the more I go, the more I've got to learn. It feels like I'm losing ground,
Yeah,
but
sure.
it's because and the important thing to remember, any living thing is either growing or it's dying. You're either
Yeah,
learning or you're decaying.
yeah.
So if you think you know it all and you're not learning anymore,
And
you're
this
on
is
the slide,
a real
brother.
big problem with traditional
Like,
martial art. Yeah,
yeah. So there
let's
is
not
a
start
ton
that
more to
conversation.
learn.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah, well, cool. This is, I tell you, I could talk for hours more. It's just such a fascinating subject to me because how many pointless arguments have people gotten into it? What's the best technique? What techniques are better than others, or which ones fail? Yeah, that's those. I do have certain what I consider high percentage techniques versus lower
Yeah,
percentage
me too.
techniques, but
Yeah,
these are the crucial skills
yeah,
that if you do them right and you get them down well, you don't have to use technique. You won't have to go to battle. The battle will be won before you set
yeah,
foot onto the battlefield.
yeah.
And usually you do it by, and I remember seeing some really great interviews with real criminals, and I've talked with police officers that have conducted these interviews. I've
And they can pick the victims
Yeah,
out
and
of.
they'll say, "Tell me about your process
Yeah,
of picking out a victim." And one of the big ones is, can I approach them with them being unaware?
yeah.
The closer I can get to them without them noticing I'm there, and the cell phone is the biggest gift to criminals ever.
Oh, just yeah,
But they'll say all it takes is for somebody to look up and look me right in the eye and go, and it kind of say, nod and say, "Hey, how's it going?" And that can be enough. Like, all right, not you. I'm going to go on to something else.
yeah,
So engage. To me, that's how when Aikido talks about connection, that's what I think it one expression of it. If
yeah.
you connect with that predator that's approaching you, and I've got another great story I'm going to wrap this up with, and that is, this was a senpai of mine when I started. He was a brown belt, and he said when he was down in New Orleans, it was him and a bunch of friends and these are a bunch of athletes, baseball players, right?
Mhm.
So you wouldn't think these guys would be on the target list, but as groups of people go, they were out, bar hopping, kind of drinking, and my friend wasn't drinking very much. He didn't, he's kind of, all right, you guys can have your beers, but I'm just gonna, kind of tag along and whatever. And he noticed that every time they came out of a bar, there was this woman that was sitting kind of leaning up against the wall or against a lamppost or something. She was just kind of hanging out. And of course, you're on Bourbon Street, you're in the quarter, and there's people everywhere. But after about the third time, he noticed we've traveled like 3 or 4 blocks, and she's there every time we come out. So as it happens, he says, I'm gonna try something. So his group went down this block. They got to a corner, and they turned the corner, and they went perpendicular to the street they were on. And they got about 30 or 40 feet, and because they were all walking one direction, right? And he turns around, and she's walking up the sidewalk behind him. And he just stares at her and smiles and kind of nods his head and just keeps looking at her. And she freezes and stops and then turns the other direction, walked away. And that was the last they saw of her.
Yeah, yeah.
Now he says, to this day, I have no idea what her intention was. Was she a pickpocket? Was she some kind of a street hustler? Was she like the lookout for some, ne'er-do-well thugs?
Yeah.
I have no idea. But he says, I know we were being followed. I know we were being cased. I just don't know what was going to happen next. But he said that eye contact, when she knew that I knew she was there, that ended the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I thought,
I mean, that's
great. To me, that was Aikido perfectly, right?
that's
He
the
connected with
definition
her.
of a rimi.
She
That
didn't
is a
want
rimi right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no battle that was fought. They didn't get into a fight. They didn't get, nothing like that. But it was an awareness combined with an engagement.
Yeah. That's great.
Very
That's a great
subtle
story.
one, but but yeah, you get around people, and boy, there's so much to learn about how they work,
For
and
sure.
reading them and stuff. And I've hunted high and low for books on profiling, and there's only like one or two out there, at least when I looked.
Yeah.
There's a bit more on body language, and I say this for people that want to dig into this more. I looked into books on body language, and there's like how to spot when people are lying, how to spot when people are cheating or when they're trying to deceive you. And there's body language covers such a broad spectrum. What we're looking for is kind of the body language behind aggression and behind conflict.
Yeah.
That is pretty specialized, and there's not a lot of material there. So be
No.
careful if you go on Amazon, you want to start buying books on body language. There is some material out there. There's some good stuff on
I just
YouTube that you can find, but you got to sift through it quite a bit.
talk to guys that do it for a living, or
Yes.
girls that do it for a living.
Yeah,
Basically.
if you want the direct source, that's going to save you a lot of time. If you can talk to profilers, talk to professionals, you'll get a lot. But you can get a lot from practicing just reading people, reading their intentions. Get an idea of how they're feeling. Are they agitated? Are they nervous? Are they depressed? Are they excited? Are they happy? Are they, and you'll get better just by doing, even if you don't go talk to them and say, tell me how you're feeling. Because I guessed, this is, don't even bother with that. And you can start with people, because those are the easy ones, because you get a baseline for them. But practice complete strangers and just start reading their body language, and you'll start getting a feel for it. It's a tremendous learning experience. And I think that those skills are what is the other side of the coin from all the physical stuff that we practice all the time. And we can cross those over. We can start, exploring that more. And a few simple rules, like don't let somebody close, let your hands come up, and don't let them behind you. To me, those are the golden three.
That's a good start, right? That should be in everyone's syllabus right there.
Yeah.
You start with that,
Yeah. Yep. And the who was it that posted up, Nathaniel, that posted up the reverse randori drill where you had 2 nages and 1 uke, kind of as an apprehension. I've actually wanted to toy around with doing 2 nages and 3 or 4 or 5 ukes, because now what happens when you have an ally, right? Because we always get used to keep everybody in front of you. You don't want an uke behind you. But now what happens when you have 2 to deal with? So there's a lot that we can explore and have a great fun with without getting hurt. All those people that say, oh my God, if the intensity goes up, everybody's gonna be getting hurt and go to the hospital. It's like, no, there's a lot you can do with this stuff, still stay safe, and have a ball doing it. Every time we've played with this type of thing, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, and very informative. So I would definitely encourage people to brave trying out some new things.
100%.
So I'll let you have the last word. I've been kind of babbling. So
no, it's good. Yeah. So just to reiterate, anyone that's made it to the end, thank you for support. I mean, your podcast is really, really worth people following, because I think you're getting, you're asking some questions about, especially Aikido, that tend to get pushed to one side, and unless we open our minds up to ways we can improve what we're doing, as you say, things stagnate. It'd be really cool to see, even if it's only 1 or 2 people have got some suggestions how we can add this kind of stuff into our training. That would be fabulous. So, but thank you again for asking me on. It's always a pleasure, mate. Always like talking to you, and be interesting to see what comes out of this.
Absolutely, Duncan. Thank you so much for joining us, and
for
everybody, thank you for hanging in there, and we're back at it. So until the next one, we'll talk to you soon.
Beautiful. Thank you, mate.
Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Stay tuned for more episodes. I've got some great stuff on the way very soon. In the meantime, enjoy your training.